Meeting to order today. This is an annexation public hearing, Thursday, August 20th, 2015, 6 p.m. It's about 6:05. Our invocation tonight, was there a volunteer that would like to do an invocation for us? Gloria? Okay, please. Thank you.
Everybody will stand up, please, and bow your heads. Holy Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessings that we receive every day. Bless everyone that is here and all their families. Bless our council and our mayor. We ask you this in your most precious name. Amen.
Amen.
I have an established quorum. We have Councilman Rodriguez, Councilman Guerrero, Councilman Tejada. At this time, we could recite the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
This time I'll ask if there's anyone that would like to make any citizen comments. If not, I'll pass it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. What we're here to do today is to have our second public hearing on the proposed annexations that we've been talking about for a little bit, and to go over specifically some requested revisions to the non-annexation development agreement. And I think the easiest way to do this, we had a meeting on Friday with some of the landowners. Everybody kind of talked about what they would like included, what changes they would like. So I've put together, and you should have up there, a red line copy with the changes that have been requested by the landowners, as opposed to the original document that we sent out. So I believe to keep everything in kind of some sort of order, if we just start through and go through each one of the changes, we can have the landowners and council discuss any questions they have on each of those as we go. And that way we can kind of check off as we go down the list. So the first one that we've got here is on Article 2, which is restrictions on use. And it's 2.2, where we talk about the owners not filing any sort of subdivision or development documents with the city or Wilson County. What we've put in here is an amendment to allow for individuals to file plats to subdivide property, to give it to immediate family members for residential purposes. So we have some landowners where the tracts are held by multiple family members. So this would allow individuals to say, okay, my brother wants his tract to build a house on, so he can do that without violating the agreement and causing the annexation of the property.
How many landowners are we looking at?
We're looking at 5 total landowners, as far as 5 total tracts. As far as individual landowners, that I'm unsure, but I think
Yeah.
I know the whole
because it's family owned and so forth. Okay. Now, how many showed up for the meeting?
I think pretty much everybody showed up.
All representatives of all 5 tracts?
The Tiftons,
Okay.
the Ullmans, Mr. Smith,
Okay, so everybody
and
was
the
in,
Holtons.
so everyone was in agreement to some of these changes that,
Yeah, at our meeting on Friday, all the landowners were in agreement with what was presented and what's included in here.
okay. And this agreement is across the board to all 5 of those landowners?
Yes, sir.
There's no special provisions to either one or the other?
No,
Okay.
not between individual tracts or between the, I guess what we'll call the north and the west. Both of those areas, it's all included in this.
Okay.
So are there any questions on the subdivision part on that? Any of the landowners have anything on that? Okay.
And that's within the 3rd degree, you said that?
Third degree would be grandchildren, nieces, nephews, obviously children and parents and things like that would be included. Anything 3rd degree, so you go down, yourself, your children, your grandchildren, and then your brothers and sisters, nieces, nephews, grandparents.
Okay.
And if there's no more questions, I'm going to go on to 2.3. And this was a section in there that said that the owners would not build anything on the property if it would require a building permit, should it have been annexed. What we've done is, because these are farm properties, agricultural properties, you do need structures that are occasionally built. If a barn has to be redone, things like that. So what we've done is to say anything that relates to the agricultural, wildlife, timber management, I think these are all only agricultural, they can still construct structures that are necessary for that. What we've done here is to go kind of along with the previous section. Any residential structures that are built out there though, because eventually, and we'll get to this, at some point in the future, they will be annexed into the city. They'll still have to follow Floresville building codes and everything like that. But as far as barns, sheds, anything of that nature, they'd still be free to construct out there without being in violation of the agreement.
New or fix okay?
It could be new or if it's okay. If they want to tear it down and start from scratch.
As long as it's for agricultural use?
Correct. For the existing agriculture.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
My name is Ronald Tipton. I just had a question. We need to build a hay barn, and if I understand this right, we would be able to do that, and we would need to come down and get a permit before we built that, or how does that work?
Yeah, it would be, for a hay barn, no, you would not, because that would be related to the existing agricultural use.
Okay.
It's only if there's a new residential structure or if there's an accessory building built to the residence or anything that's out there.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Such as an addition, storage shed, or garage?
Yes.
Or,
Porch, swimming pool.
anything dwelling?
Yeah. Any further questions on that? All right, then I'll go down 2.4, just kind of briefly discuss there. Anything that's part of the residence that's out there already, if there's an expansion, if there's a garage, anything like that, then that would need permitting, or it'd have to be done in accordance with the city ordinances on that. Okay. Then 2.5 is a new section that was added in here following discussions, because the local government code allows something called a development plan. And you can kind of think of it as a miniature version of the city's land use plan and master plan. And it says, okay, we're in a high traffic area. I know the Ullman property is over by the event center. That could be an area where a hotel might be wanted. So what they could do is do a development plan now, submit it along with this agreement that says, okay, the front, 500 feet of the property are going to be reserved for this purpose, things of that nature. And then if there's development on there, only that area is annexed. The remainder of the area that complies with the development plan and stays agricultural, stays current use, would still stay as part of the plan for the term of the plan, of the agreement. So, like I said, the biggest example there is if you're in a traffic area where you know, okay, this is going to be developed at some point. Right now, it's an all or nothing. You either leave it as the way it is at the moment, and then at some point in the future, if somebody comes in and says, hey, we want to build a hotel here, you have to do a cost-benefit analysis of, is this worth losing the entirety of the property for the hotel? Under a development plan, you would say, well, when we started this, we said we were going to reserve these areas for development. It can be developed, and only that part would be annexed into the city.
The responsibility of the plan is the landowner, or the city?
It would be, have to put together by the landowner and then presented as part of the agreement to the city, and the city would therefore have to sign off on it since it would be part of the plan.
Sign off of it and say that not to annex it or to annex it?
Well, they would have to sign off and say, we agree that you want to reserve this part for development and reserve this part for no annexation.
And that's done at the time that they're planning on doing it, let's say 10 years from now?
No, that's done when this agreement is signed.
Okay.
So you have to have a future, you have to kind of take a chance and predict the future when you make it.
And is there a time frame that's given to them to say that it has to be done within 30 days or?
And that's something that was also discussed. Right now, our plan says these have to be in by September 3rd for a final vote on September 10th. We have 90 days from following these hearings, so there was talk about pushing that back until October to give the landowners more time if council were to agree to allow for development plans. So we would have, what, until August, September, till about this time, November, about November 20th. Would be the maximum amount of time to put together one of those plans and have the entire agreements with the plans signed and approved by both parties.
Chris, why are we constrained to September the 3rd? I mean, we've made the modification, so can't we extend that deadline?
Well, yes, sir. And September 3rd was just on the timetable that we put together to have the landowners return it so we could do it at the earliest opportunity, which was September 10th. With this going, we can obviously modify the timelines out until November 20th, would be the last date.
Okay, even then, why is November 20th? Where do we get that number from?
That's in the statute. That's local government code 43.064. You have 90 days from the institution of proceedings for annexation. Those start following the hearings, and this is the second hearing on this.
For what we know, are there any landowners that will be utilizing that development plan?
The landowners are welcome to discuss that. This isn't, like I said, it's a workshop here, or it's a hearing for the landowners.
Can you explain the benefit of that both ways with the development agreement, in that it protects the landowner for future development to say that if I'm going to develop 20 acres of my 100, I don't have to suddenly say all 100 acres is going to be annexed, but the city will be able to annex that developed portion and still maintain the agreement as far as for future annexations on the remainder of the property. This does not have any impact on the city's ability to annex adjoining properties in the future.
Correct. It would only be for that area, and it would also give some benefit because if you know, like Mr. Miller said, there's 20 acres that you know this person wants to develop. When you do future land use plans, when there's amendments, you know that that would be included as part of something that they're planning on developing, so you can incorporate that.
So theoretically, they could come to a development plan within that time frame, the whole property cut up in pieces, and it would just be annexed one piece at a time?
As it's developed, yes.
As it's developed?
Yes.
So they can have, 5-acre tracts developed, for the whole family or whatever it is, and just be pieced out a little bit at a time to say, this is annexed in, going from one side of the land to the other?
Theoretically, yes. That would be subject to council approval to adopt the agreement with that as an attachment. So if the council would know you're dividing, your 100 acres up into 100 single-acre tracts, that's not going to work. It needs to be blocks. That would be for the council and for the landowners to talk about when the development plans are submitted. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I'm Peggy Tipton, Margaret Tipton. I want a clarification on this. We have no plans for development at this point. It is certainly in the business area on Business 181 to be a benefit at some point for somebody to develop the portion that's along the highway there. And so if I say, but we don't know, it's not our plan at the time, and we don't know who would come to us when and how much they would want. We certainly want to retain our farm on the backside, on the river and whatever. If we put a certain number of acres that makes sense to us now, that would be possible for someone to develop, and then the time comes in when they don't develop the whole, and we'll continue the agricultural operations on the whole place as of now, and at that point, maybe sell off or maybe a future person in the family would want to develop that portion, a portion of it. But if they don't develop the whole amount that we've said, hey, this is possible, the portion that they don't develop, that would continue to be agriculture? No, okay.
If you set out a block of 20 acres for future development, and somebody comes in and says, we want this 10 acres of it to develop, the other 10 would still be annexed, because it would be part of the development block that's on it.
Okay.
Now, you could have 10-acre development block 1, development block 2, development block 3, but again, that would be up to the council to say, do we want to allow it to be micromanaged down that much, or do we just want to have this 20-acre block?
But everything beyond that would stay
Yes.
agricultural, exactly.
Okay. So it would make sense for us, if you would so agree, to put it maybe in two different blocks. Because, you know, something could be just right along the highway, we could keep a pretty good sized farm, or it could be, something larger would go in for a certain amount. So we do need to consider that. Okay, that's what I was a little confused on, and I thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So Chris, it can be done in 2 blocks or 1 block?
It can be done in as many blocks as the city and the landowner agree to.
But theoretically, they could, you know, like I said earlier, you know, you can put it in increments of 5 acres if you want to, or for the first, you know, 10 acres. And, you know, but still has to come to council for approval, you said, through the agreement, you know, to where they could develop that first 5 acres, and then that's the only thing that will be annexed in. And then in the future, somebody else wants to purchase that other 5 acres, you know, then that will be annexed in at the time that it gets developed.
Correct. And if it never gets developed during the term, then it stays agricultural the entire time.
And I don't think any of the landowners are looking at that kind of micro subdivision of their properties. When we look at the properties that are involved, you know, obviously the Ullman property along 97 West and the other properties up the business loop, the business owners are concerned about those properties that are touching the highway and the development there. And such a development agreement would be certainly advantageous to the city so that you're not having to annex property that's not developed. And only annex those pieces that, as they're developed, and be able to provide services at that time, instead of being able to provide services to the entirety of the property.
I think I personally would, you know, piece it out, you know, and at least to have some set aside. You know,
Well, I'm certain that there's going to be some piecing in it.
If it's even questionable, you know, that they possibly might, I'd bring it to an agreement.
I think that you will see that, but I don't think you will see it to the point that it's down to, you know, 1 acre tracts or square block tracts in this thing. And as Mrs. Tipton said, you know, they probably want to look at that piece of the property that is touching the highway for maybe 500 feet, and then a part 2 that is beyond that 500 feet to maybe 1,500 feet off of the highway. And the other thing to consider in all of these properties, there is a large portion that is floodplain, that will not ever be developed, you know, that will remain farms. You
Now,
know,
any time that the property gets, you know, an exchange of hands to outside of theirs, it'll be automatically annexed in?
No. It stays, this will be filed in the deed records and run with the land. So you're free to sell the property to anybody, but they're going to be bound by the same restrictions here.
Okay.
So you can move, let's say we do this with a 20 and an 80, you can sell the entirety of the 100 to somebody, but if they want to develop or they want to do anything, they're still bound by the 20, 80, or whatever other terms are agreed to. It becomes essentially a restricted covenant that goes along with the land.
So basically, whenever we took out, everything was taken out to say that at any given time it's subdivided, it'll be annexed in?
Right, as long as it's not.
That caveat's been taken out of the agreement?
No, because if it's subdivided, that would still go, but you can sell the entirety to somebody perfectly fine.
Chris, with those restrictions for 45 years, is that really advantageous for the landowner to wait 45 years?
Well, they can always voluntarily petition at any time, or sell to a developer and subdivide and breach the agreement kind of voluntarily to get the development coming in. They're always welcome to do whatever they would like in violation of this, because the violation just means it gets annexed into the city. So if they want to sell to Hilton, even if we don't agree to a development plan in 20 years, 25 years, they can do so and get the annexation then.
So at that point, they would take care of the infrastructure.
Well, that would be between the city and them to work out at that time. If it's a hotel coming in, I'm sure Hilton would pay to have sewer out there. If it's a landowner doing it individually and they already have septic, as we talked about last time, then the city could say it's too expensive to get a sewer line out there right now. You can keep your septic even though you're inside the city limits now.
I don't know any property outside the city, but I don't think that's in the best interest of the landowners to wait 45 years.
But there isn't a wait.
No, you don't have to
They can
wait.
do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
They can take their portion that they identified for development, or the entirety of it, and develop it tomorrow.
45 years seems like a long time.
45 years, it's
This is
actually.
the non-annexation part of it.
It's actually protecting the owner for
Farm.
45 years.
These are very unilateral agreements to the benefit of the owner, no matter how legally I can write them to try to benefit the city on these. At the end of the day, they do protect the agricultural landowner, because they can, at any time, they can join the city whenever
Yes,
they.
protecting the ag exempt, that's true.
Correct.
But if there's potential development, it's not to their
Well,
advantage.
If at
Why
any
not?
time there's potential development, that's what he means, that it's in breach of contract, that then you're already into a voluntary annexation, correct?
Well, at that point, it becomes an
Or-
agreement between the city and the landowner.
No.
It doesn't become automatic.
Right,
Yes.
it is
It
not
is
automatic,
automatic.
it is at the discretion of the city. So if you breach and decide to put a Hilton in there, it's not automatic annexation, it's automatic to go to the city to decide to annex you. That
It's
is-
at the city's decision, not the landowner.
Correct.
And
But
the
if
city
there
could say
hasn't
yes.
been a breach,
Yeah.
then it's only the landowner's decision to breach or not.
Yeah, the moment the landowner breaches the contract, they have essentially said, we're ready to be voluntarily annexed.
Correct.
And if the city council says annex it, it's annexed. There's no public hearing, no process involved in that.
Exactly.
But in 45 years, maybe we'll be in a better position for that property to be annexed.
And that's actually the next line in here is, we had initially said at 15, there were discussions of 45. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add in on that discussion.
That is allowable by the state. That is law. That's the maximum by the state. And it's certainly, we feel good about that, since we really would like to keep running cows out there for a long time.
All right. If there's not anything else, then we'll go, I think this is the last one, in Article 6, which is now regarding initial zoning. We do have an ordinance in the books that says initial zoning is residential. What we did is, because these are in kind of commercially viable areas, we added a new section that says, upon the expiration of the term or upon a breach by the landowner where it would become able to be annexed by the city, the landowner can come to the city and request an immediate rezoning of the area to be in accordance with the land use plan, either as it exists now or as it's amended in the future. So if it's in I believe these are all, Mrs. Turner just gave me a copy of the land use plan. I think if we see, is there a map that goes with this?
I didn't know they could do big map, big map.
It's pretty much.
And Chris, the land use plan in these areas, and I looked at the map that's on the city's webpage, identifies all of these areas as commercial.
That's commercial.
Okay, and for future use. And essentially what they've done is drawn a big circle around the area and said, this area is commercial, this area is residential, or this area is industrial. In both cases, 97 West and Business Loop 181 North, both areas are identified as commercial.
So then what would happen is, if we default residential, the landowners could come in and say, we'd like to petition the city to make it commercial. The city looks, it's in accordance with the land use plan, it's commercial. Should that change in the future, then they'd have to go through the rezoning process. But as long as it's in accordance with the land use plan, obviously, it's still a council decision, but it is saying, you know, if it's in accordance with the land use plan, it should be passed.
Mayor, I just want to say that the land use plan we're referring to was adopted, I believe, in February of 2014, and the author of that plan, actually, Chris Stewart here, is the author of the plan that is designing it. And so this is what planning and zoning was for. He helped us put together the annexation agreement, as you know, and the plan, and so it's really kind of coincides. So that's what we're hoping to do, to have a cohesive type of development that it does align with what we need for the land use plan. So he can speak to that. Do you have any comments on the land use plan, Chris? Chris Stewart?
I'll just say that the future land use plan is there as your guide for development-related decisions. Specifically, or usually it's most often consulted when you're talking about rezoning requests. So that's kind of the first place we look to see, does this make sense with our larger vision, our longer-term vision for how the city's going to grow. And it just gives us some place to reference back to remind us how we keep the city's land uses in balance, so we have a healthy, sustainable city over time. And that's the purpose of the future land use plan, and it's certainly helpful to reference that as our policy document in the agreement.
And I think as a council and all the landowners can tell, it's a pretty common sense plan. Obviously, if you're along Business 181 or 97 West, those are areas of more likely than not commercial growth, less residential, because you're right on a major.
That was going to be my question, is to, you know, it does, given that, you know, whenever you did the land use plan, you know, there weren't anybody particular in mind when you did the land use plan. Has anything changed since then, you know, given the information that has been received from the landowners and so forth?
To my knowledge, you know, the plan, if we do see something that changes over time, if we do, you know, some external force comes, say a Toyota plant locates on the north side of 181, then that's a big impact, and we should consider some amendments to the plan. But until those kind of changes present themselves through private development processes, then we just continue to evaluate our plan year to year through the Planning and Zoning Commission and make those changes as necessary. But as it was developed, we weren't looking at any specific property owners
Correct.
or specific developments. Simply, these are the types of land uses we're going to need in the future. These are the types of policies as part of the text document that accompany it. And we just look at it on an annual basis or on an as-needed basis in the case of the rezoning.
And Chris, the way this reads, you know, is in accordance with the city's land use plan as it exists at the time of annexation. So if that land use plan should change, say they identify an area as industrial, okay, unless the landowner's development at that time is industrial, this clause would not apply. They would be subject to the regular rezoning process.
Correct. P&Z and hearings and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yes.
And the city is in agreement with this agreement, Ms. Henrietta?
I did have an opportunity to review it. Chris did a really good job of following the meeting from our last public hearing that we had. We agreed to meet on Friday. I think it was 6 o'clock. This past Friday, Chris passed it out. I did email it. I apologize. You know, everybody's on, I found 2 emails and no idea. So we emailed it to them. They have it. I think I emailed it to the council as well. Staff has no objection to this agreement. We've had a chance to go over it. I know Chris Stewart and Chris Hug have had an opportunity. We have no objections to this agreement as presented.
And being that it's not a consideration action item, you know, like we would just move on.
Correct. This is just a time for the landowners and the council to ask each other questions, to ask me legal questions, Chris Stewart, planning questions, just kind of go over what we're going to have as a plan. Is it'll be up for preliminary approval with whatever terms get hammered out today. If they stay this way, then this one will be up. If there's further discussion following my talking, then whatever comes out of that will go up. But August 27th will be when the preliminary agreement goes up for approval. If everybody agrees to it at that time, we'll have to discuss changes to the timeline, mostly due to the development plan, if that's accepted as part of it. And so that'll be up for a vote, and then the actual agreement as well. And then the submission date for the development plans would be, we talked about October. Like I said, they could go out till November 20th. So since we're all here, it's a public open hearing on this. There should be some discussion of what date we would want those development plans to be submitted by, if council, just in case council passes that part at the 27th.
And to that point, Chris, can I suggest 60 days, pushing it 60 days? You have a total of 90 days. If we push the deadline for the submission of the agreement and the development plan 60 days, that would afford the landowners ample time to seek counsel and put such a plan together. And it would also give the city time to review those agreements prior to that November 27th deadline.
Correct. And so we can do, as October 20th, as proposed. That would give the 60 days from today, and then move forward from there.
Were we not under the understanding that the landowners had agreed to it?
This is the landowner's proposed changes. Nobody's signed on anything yet. This is a result of discussions that we held with everybody, came to this document. It's got their proposed changes. Now council at the 27th will get a chance to say, yes, we accept these changes. If these changes are accepted, then we'll have to talk about the timeline next. So I recommend having both items on the agenda to talk about. And if it doesn't pass with these changes, then we go back to the drawing board, staying on the original path. If it does, then we talk about moving it to October 20th or whatever date.
You don't foresee any problems if they agree to it all? Or we can just-
It's up to whether council agrees to these changes or not. Yes, ma'am. And that's obviously policy has to be done at a CNA item. Can't say yes, the city agrees, or no, the city doesn't agree until there's.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, I met with all of the landowners and spoke with all of the landowners about this, and we put together a series of recommended changes that would be acceptable to the landowners. Obviously, they're going to have to take this agreement to their council and do some final touches, but for the tone of it, I think you have a very good agreement that all landowners at that meeting said if those changes could be put in, that such an agreement would be acceptable. And those changes or deletions have been made to this agreement.
Yes. Any other discussion or anything, or I'll turn it back over to you, Ma'am.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions before I close this hearing? This hearing is closed and it is 6:35.